Hey everybody, welcome to week 3 of IndieWeen, the series where I show you all a bunch of cool indie horror games that you can purchase all of for less than the price of a single AAA title, because nothing is quite spookier than wasting $60 on hot garbage when there's perfectly good indies out there. This week we're not looking at just a single game, but an ongoing series called Faith. Faith is made by one Airdorf, who released the first title in 2017, the second in 2019, and the third installment is now a New Blood title, which means it's coming out soon. I don't know, you can't even pre-order it. But hey, there's a demo for Faith Unholy Trinity, which includes the entirety of the first game for free, so that's pretty cool. Even if you splurge and pay full price for everything on Airdorf's itch.io library, you're only going to be set back like $5. Faith takes inspiration from the so-called satanic panic of the 1980s, along with a slew of classic horror movies and stuff that you'll see a lot of if you're big into your classic spookies, or you'll be like me and become aware of it all when you scroll down to the trivia page of the wiki, which is very detailed, by the way. Another major inspiration to Faith, according to Airdorf's recent interview he did with Steam, is apparently he just had a really scary dream one day in high school and was like, yo, I gotta make a video game about this. Pretty cool, my dude. The game is designed to emulate that period-esque look Atari games had during the 1980s, but all the cutscenes and certain moments in-game, it'll cut to these really chunky pixeled rotoscope animations that are extremely unnerving. As far as the genre goes, I classify this as adventure horror with a very heavy emphasis on the latter. Faith, the first game, has you walking around as little boy Blue John getting lost in a big, spooky forest. It looks like it's randomized, and I would have wholeheartedly believed that if it wasn't for me stumbling across a map of the whole forest when reading lore on the wiki. You'll eventually find the abandoned house you need to do some things in that the Vatican doesn't necessarily endorse. While you wander around, you'll find some stuff that is clearly the work of demons, so you're gonna want to hit it with a good old helping of that Jesus. Press A to whoop out your cross and cast out whatever is infesting these objects, and weaken the demon's hold on the Martin family household. By the way, all the Faith games have support for both keyboard and controller, which I'm always a big fan of. Casting out demons inside of inanimate objects will not only score you some notes that will give you a better idea of what exactly happened at the Martin family household a year ago, but will also weaken Amy Martin, the poor possessed girl that you never finished your exorcism on last year. That's something I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for exploring the community around these games and learning this from Faith speedruns, which yes, are a thing. Which, by the way, just to put it out there, Raccoonix or any of the other runners, if you manage to get onto GDQ to do Faith, I will totally commentate your couch. That sounds like it'd be the coolest thing ever. Before you get inside the house and deal with Amy, you'll have to deal with Michael Davies out in the forest. Another byproduct of a failed exorcism who's got a bone to pick with you. Who can and will make you jump right out of your seat every 30 seconds or so when he charges you from out of nowhere, and if you aren't fast with that cross, you're gonna get MORTIS. Michael might drop a note too if you cast him out enough times, which sheds a bit of light on what happened to him. You also get a fun little surprise whenever you pause the game while Michael is trying to give you that mortis. That brings us to the big spookies in-game. Faith uses rotoscoping to make its cinematics, which while they are all chunky and pixelated, they still stand in stark contrast to the simplistic design of the game's overworld. These hit that sweet spot for me where they give you the extra creeps because they're just vague enough where your mind fills in the blanks and makes it extra scary for you. Thanks to this effect, I found that all the monsters in the Faith series to be spookier than the monsters in Cry of Fear. That's not to say that those aren't horrifying in their own right, it's just that sometimes the best spooks are the ones that you've made in your own head. There's a bit more to it than that though. The environments in general are pushing just how spooky you can make 8-bit graphics, and the forest is bad enough alone, but once you get into the house, things get really scary. The minimalistic soundtrack helps ratchet up the tension too, despite being mostly a bunch of royalty-free chiptunes plus a few short little original stings. But where it really shines is where it just cuts out altogether and leaves you in silence right before things get bad. Faith also has quote-unquote voice acting using SAM, a primitive text-to-speech voice emulator that was used on Atari systems around the time that Faith takes place in. Again, it's really good at making you feel unnerved by using as little as possible. It's creepy like the emulated voice. Although I have to admit, sometimes I did get pulled out of the immersion because it's also used in wacky parody game Super Amazing Wagon Adventure. In spite of all the spookies, Faith is pretty short. It took me an hour and a half to get all the endings and find the secret with a little bit of outside help, but on that note, the secret ending is something that you're gonna need outside help to find. This isn't too surprising when we consider that even with wallpapers, custom icons, and the soundtrack in MP3 format for your enjoying, Faith's deluxe version is just under 100 megabytes. It's not too bad when we consider that if you wanted to pay for this game, it'd only cost you $2. But if you're not feeling like supporting indie devs for whatever reason, you can just download the demo of Faith Unholy Trinity on Steam, which comes with the entirety of the first game on it. Like, out the door for everything that's available, I was set back $5, which for the amount of stuff I got is pretty good, and I'd say that Faith is definitely worth the price of admission at $2. And if that wasn't enough retro spookies for you, 2 years later we got Faith Chapter 2, which in a way is both a prequel and a sequel to the first game. This time around you start with a little prologue starring Father Garcia, another pastor mentioned in letters in the first game, trying to exorcise Michael, but it's going poorly. To make matters worse, Michael gets out of his restraints and does a naughty thing to the neighbors. This disappoints Father Garcia and he wiggles on right out of there. Cut to Father John returning to Snake Hill to investigate the abandoned church that was teased in the trailer for the previous game but mysteriously absent from it. Right off the bat, you'll notice the quality of the rotoscoping has gone way up, which in turn has improved the amount of spooky stuff that can be done with them, but hasn't been improved so much that it loses that low-res effect that the previous game has. The game maps are also a lot larger, or at least they feel larger because there's more stuff going on in them. The graveyard is a bit easier to get around as opposed to the forest, and Michael's been dealt with, so we won't be seeing any of him. We will, however, be seeing a whole slew of new demons, since I guess Snake Hill is the place to be if you're a naughty fallen angel, and John's gonna have to deal with all of them if he wants to get into the abandoned church where all of this seems to be rooted from. Along the way, you'll find documentation of some sort of cult laying around with letters from some guy named Gary, and a rather disturbing mirror. You'll eventually get into that church where there's gonna be more spookies, a confirmation of which ending is canon, and the opportunity to get the really bad ending. But the demon you're looking for is in another castle, or the sewer to be specific. If you thought things were bad in the graveyard, things are gonna get worse in the sewers. Also, Dusk reference. Now, it takes about the same time, maybe a little bit longer, to get through all of Faith Chapter 2 as it does the first game, and there's only 3 endings this time around. 2 of which hinge on how good you are at escort quests, and then the really bad ending, which basically requires you to take an entirely different path through the game and do the exact opposite of what you came here to do. There's also entirely skippable areas this time around, and if you really wanted to, you could probably get more than 2 hours with the playtime out of Faith Chapter 2 in the name of completionism. As of recording this video, Chapter 2 is the only game you currently need to pay for if you want to get the experience at a whopping $2, but if you're unsure, there is a demo for Chapter 2 available on itch.io, and also if you download the Unholy Trinity. Alrighty folks, time to take a quick break for this month's second cooking segment since I missed last month's thanks to those movers. But before we do that, let's give some indie love to our anti sponsor, Acheron. Acheron is a self-described grimpunk tabletop RPG inspired by Lovecraft and SCP-style world building in which you and your bros are out to see all the crazy stuff that until recently was very illegal to study or even acknowledge. Don't worry about drawing straws to see who has to play support this time around though, because Acheron doesn't mess around with rigid class systems in the name of better gameplay roleplay balance, and instead lets your avatar spec into whatever they need as the campaign progresses in the name of making a more immersive story. Because seriously, who the heck brings a bard into a dungeon? So for this time around, we're gonna do something kind of short and sweet. The other day I was rewatching Anthony Bourdain's A Cook's Tour, and I noticed that on the LA episode, they went straight to Pink's and this other weird foo-foo tourist hot dog place. And now, while I love the work of Bourdain, one of the big gripes I have with that show is that they never even try to look for proper street food whenever Anthony's in America. Like, come on, you're in LA and you didn't even bother to look for like a fruit cart or one of those carts with all the crazy stuff in them, and then they ring their little bells. But back to hot dogs. I don't consider any of like the artsy fartsy stuff they paraded in front of the cameras to make pale wieners simmering in dubious water back in New York look like good food to be the West Coast equivalent of a hot dog. A real West Coast hot dog is served on one of those little mobile griddle things just outside of a sporting event near you. You know, outside a Staples Center after the Lakers put on a display that won't be getting anyone free tacos tonight, just beyond where event security can be bothered to patrol outside of the Hollywood Bowl because there's no way in hell you're paying a 2-digit number for a frozen personal pizza. Or back in the day down at Wild Rivers when you went to that really cool hot dog stand and you could also get that gigantic pineapple thing. Like heck, when my wife became a citizen of this country, who was there to give her and the thousands of other inductees into this country their first meal as an American but the LA hot dog cart people? Alright, enough monologuing, let's get into this. The version of this dog is stupid simple. First, cut up some onions and peppers of your choosing long ways, and since we don't have a griddle to toss them into, just grab a couple pans, put one on high heat, and saute, stirring occasionally. My rule of thumb is 1/2 onion and 1/2 of a pepper per dog. Once that gets going, take out a good sized dog and a couple strips of bacon. Believe it or not, there will be a day when one of these cooking segments does not have bacon, but today is not that day. By the way, don't use thick cut bacon or else it won't properly wrap and it's going to take far too long to cook. Now, wrap your dog in the bacon tightly with a little bit of overlap to account for the shrinkage as it cooks. One strip ought to be just enough to cover the middle and 2 strips should cover the whole dog easily. Now plop that sucker into a pan on medium-high heat and cook, turning as needed to make sure that all sides of the bacon are browned. The dog is done when the bacon on top of it is, and by that time, the veggies should be done too. Now put that dog on a good side bun, and then put as much of those veggies as you can fit on top of everything. As an end note, some folks here go for full-on fajita veggies for the toppings, but I think that's a little overkill since this is meant to be made on a griddle the size of a large cutting board. Try this for yourself. Tell me how it went, and remember that no matter how artisanal or disrupting of the industry you think you are, avocado has no place on a hot dog. So while the trilogy of games hasn't been finished yet, Airdorf is working on the third and presumably final Faith game, as there's already a demo that went out with all the other New Blood games earlier this year. The demo can be downloaded on Steam, and like I mentioned earlier, comes with the entirety of the first Faith game. You can do the whole demo in just inside of a half an hour, but that doesn't make it any less spooky than its predecessors. The moment here when you lose your cross and you get a flash camera is just something else. I asked Airdorf about if Unholy Trinity would be out this month for the season, and unfortunately he said it's still on the soon trademark timetable. Don't fret though, there's plenty more content we can get our hands on in the meantime. Also, as a quick note, I know that we usually cover the story around this time in these kind of videos, but I'm gonna hold off for now since Faith's story hasn't run its course yet, and I just don't think that'd be fair. If Faith was a little too intense for you, there's a bit of lighthearted fare in Earl's Day Off. Earl's Day Off was part of the Fishing Horror Game Jam, yes, I read that right, and it's a good half hour of angling in a creepy pond trying to get your wedding ring back. If that's not enough Airdorf for you though, there's also a couple of promotional tie-in games he did for some indie horror movies that are a good quick distraction and are free on his itch.io page. Airdorf also contributed to the Dread X collection, but since I simply don't have enough time to cover all of that, I'm gonna leave that one as optional. So by a quick check of the numbers here, this puts our running total at somewhere between $2 and $25 for all the games so far. Broken down, that's $20 for Close to the Sun if you weren't able to get it for free last summer, a wonderful $0 to play Cry of Fear in all of its glory, a bare minimum of $2 to experience all of Faith so far, and a max of $5 if you want to support the indie dev scene and pay a full price for both Faith, Faith Chapter 2, and maybe throw $1 Airdorf's way for Earl's Day Off to get you to 5 even. Personally, right now, I'm sitting at a total of $5 spent since I got Close to the Sun for free and paid the full $5 for the Faith games plus Earl's Day Off. Now, Faith Unholy Trinity is supposedly going to be around $10 and will get you all 3 Faith games in full, but I'm choosing not to take that into account for totaling up all the games of IndieWeen. 1, because it's not out yet, and 2, you can't even pre-order the thing. It doesn't have a proper price yet, so I can't confirm that it's $10. If it's any consolation though, even if you do pay like $10 for all the Faith games hypothetically, that'd still make all the games we're going to cover this month less than $60. Coming up next, we're gonna pump pump the brakes a bit on the undiluted spooky and enjoy some spooky with a bit of silly mixed in Baroque Decay's Yuppie Psycho. Special thanks to all my $10 patrons: Elisa Nera, Tor H, Richard H, Paul D, Graham R, Spectate, Niles D, Yannick Z, Memesh Lingding, Deadnegator, Carl Steen, Chili Moon Buns, OMG Ponies, Bam Bam, Toxico, Shredded Paper Plate, Big Fluffers, and French Toast. Oh, hey, I did that all in one breath. I'm a little proud of myself for that. I'm also real proud to give a hello and welcome to new patrons: Paul D, Squire, Aaron D, and Sober and Disorderly. I turned on the yearly pledge thing for those of you that want to support the channel but are also big fans of that Costco shopping like I am, and I'm really surprised that some of you are already down for it. Check out patreon.com/charlatanwonder for advanced access to new videos, updates on what's coming up next, and possibly extra cat videos in 4K. Thanks to the patrons, I was able to afford a proper camera and filming setup, so of course we're gonna put the spoils up on Patreon. Regardless of whether or not you can or will support the channel, it's cool. I wish all of you the best, and to stay safe, stay inside, wear your mask whenever you gotta go out, and enjoy this cat video. Just this side? Okay. Big bed. Okay, fine. Oh no, the dish is empty. Somebody gobbled up their food too fast.